Sure hope it is, because put a lot of effort into this. Cool. Alright. So, hello and welcome. Today is frickin' heck. Apologies for this. It's just some degree of technical goof-ups at the start. It happens. But, that's life, You win some, you lose some. And today, we're gonna read some. Gonna read Alice Isn't Dead. Indeed it is, Turtle. Today, our literature of choice is, let me see if I can get this on camera. Alice Isn't Dead by Joseph Fink. It's quite a nice book. I'm assuming, if it's anything like the podcast, which I've I've listened to the first 2 seasons of. And, yeah. It's good. Today we will be reading to my lovely Tamagotchis. Acute watchers may notice, oh, where's the red one with the Supreme logo on it? Oh yes, it is the Welcome to Night Vale person, that is correct. Viewer Turtle Portal. It's the Welcome to Night Vale writer person, Joseph Fink. And we have our 4 Tamagotchis we're reading to today. And let's just get right to it. Apologies if I'm a little bit shaky or low energy or high energy. I don't know what the word is, but if it's a bit uncertain, it's all good. Excellent. First time stream watcher. Let's begin. Part 1. Thistle. Keisha Taylor settled back into the booth and tried to enjoy her turkey club. The turkey club did not make this easy. A diner attached to a gas station, a couple hours outside of Bismarck, a grassy place between towns. Keisha's main criteria for choosing the diner had been ample parking for her truck. Once upon a time, people chose food based on season or the migration patterns of animals. She selected her meals based on the parking situation. Her difficult relationship with what the menu called the Chef's Special Club was made more complicated by a patron in the booth adjacent to hers. The man was eating an omelet, scooping up big chunks of eggs with long, grease-stained fingers and shoving them into his mouth, each bite followed by a low grunt. He was a large man with a face that sagged on one side, a lump on the top of his shoulder, and a long fold of extra skin hanging from one arm. His clothes were filthy, and she could smell him from where he sat. Smelled like rot, not bad exactly, but earthy, like fruit disintegrating into soil. His dirty yellow polo shirt had the word thistle on it. He was staring at Keisha with eyes that went yellow at the edges. He chewed with his mouth open, and his feet and food were both a dull yellow. Keisha did her best to look anywhere else. At the crowd of bystanders behind the on-location reporter, on the muted televisions, a crowd she reflexively scanned for a familiar face, or the bathroom door as the cook took his 3rd visit since she had arrived. Breaking narration for a bit. King shit. If you work in food service, take as many bathroom breaks as possible. Blah, blah, blah. At a van driving by the highway with the cartoon logo of chicken and the name Praxis in bubble font. But the man's grunts were insistent, and soon she couldn't look anywhere else, and then, to her horror, he got up, omelet hanging from his lips, and he limped toward her like his legs had no muscle, mere sacks of meat attached loosely to his torso. "Doesn't look much like rain," he said, plopping himself across the table from her and licking the egg off his lips with long, wet passes of his pale tongue. The smell of damp earth got stronger. Her heart was pounding, as it often did when she felt trapped, which she often did, her life at the best of times. Sorry. My old throat problem, but we're good now. The smell of damp earth got stronger, and her heart was pounding, as it often did when she felt trapped, which she often did. Her life at the best of times was a minefield of possible triggers for anxiety, and this was not the best of times. "Hope you don't mind if I join you," he said. Not a question or a request, but a joke. He laughed, and his jaw sank crookedly into his neck. I was hoping to eat alone," she said, down at her sandwich. "Good people deserve good things." She didn't know what to say to that. He scratched his cheek, and some of the skin peeled away. "It's dangerous out here." She didn't want to engage with him at all. Felt even responding negatively might encourage him, so she started to slide off the duct tape patchwork that had once been a booth, grabbing her backpack and making a determined look toward the door against the pulsing of her panicked heart. He held a hand up and she froze, wanting to leave, but not able to find a way to do so. "Want to see something funny?" he said in a voice with no humor in it. It is often said that bad experiences are like nightmares, but what Keisha noticed most in this moment is how real it was, how she couldn't escape its reality, how she would never be able to convince herself she had remembered any part of that evening incorrectly. He got up, wiping the egg from his hands onto the word thistle on his chest. His face was slack and not arranged right. He walked over to a table where a man sat, a truck driver probably. The man looked like a truck driver, she thought. What does a truck driver look like? "Hey, Earl," the thistle man said. "Huh?" said Earl, frowning. The thistle man grabbed him by the back of the neck, and Earl's face went blank. The thistle man guided Earl gently out of his seat, like a parent shepherding a sleepy child. Earl's eyes were empty pools of water. Neither Earl nor the thistle man paid their checks, and no one made a move to help. No one looked. Keisha didn't know what to do. She walked toward the door, wanting to help, having no idea how. "You planning on paying for that?" said her waitress. "What? Yeah. Keisha handed over what she thought was the right amount, left some sort of tip, and was outside in the night, unusually hot for a Midwestern spring. The lights on one side of the gas station were out, and in the shadows the man in the thistle shirt was cradling Earl. Earl was fully awake again, but the man's arms clung like ropes around Earl, and he couldn't move. She could see the pulsing of his muscles as he tried, the strain in his face. Behind him, in a different world, people sat eating waffles and sausages. "Shh," the man in the thistle shirt said to Earl, who tried to scream in response, but the scream was lost in the baggy flesh of his captor. The loose-skinned man didn't seem human. He was like a boogeyman from a vaguely recalled nightmare. The thistle man, he bent down and took a bite out of Earl, at the artery in his armpit. Earl made a noise like a balloon letting out air, and blood poured down his torso. He was crying, but still couldn't move. The thistle man reached his long fingers into the wound and tore off fragments of flesh, lifting them into his mouth. The movement was the same mechanical movement he had made with the omelet. Keisha had only a moment to decide how to respond, and she didn't need even that. She ran, of course, ran for her trucks with her breath and heartbeat deafening in her ears. The thistle man chuckled as she went, slurping another fragment of Earl's body into his mouth. As Keisha started the engine, she looked at Earl, who looked back at her. A man who had expected to go to sleep tonight, who had ideas about what the next few days would be like for him, had some sort of plan for the future, who was instead watching the one person who could help him, driving herself to safety, leaving him with only a monster to accompany him in his dissipation. Although Earl and his murderer didn't know it, there was another witness, a small figure in a hoodie, standing behind one of the fuel pumps, the hood drawn over the face. The figure in the hoodie wasn't running away, but was no more able to help than Keisha. Some moments can't be changed. Do we want to hear chapter 2, or is that enough for tonight? Because it'll be an awful short stream if we Don't, but, it's really up to the audience. Not sure how good a read. Chapter 2. Alice's funeral had been a strange occasion. Not because she wasn't well liked. Almost everyone liked Alice the moment they met her. She had ease and a casual intimacy that transformed people she met instantly into friends. In a way, she balanced out Keisha, who was withdrawn and anxious. At a party on her own, Keisha would feel lost, but with Alice, she was able to step into conversations, letting her wife lead the way wherever her own line of thought faltered. The funeral was strange because Alice's death had been strange. No cause of death, no body, no certainty. There was a disappearance, and, after a long and increasingly hopeless search, the presumption of death. And so Alice's friends and her family mourned while holding on to the thought that maybe after all Alice was alive somewhere, although none of them, least of all Keisha, believed it. Meanwhile, the funeral presented Keisha with what was, in a practical way, a party easy to navigate, and she did not have Alice to help her. Instead, Keisha carried her grief through the crowd, and her friends reached out and softly touched her and murmured, and she kept moving from room to room as though one of those rooms somehow Alice would be waiting. 2 years after the funeral, knowing Alice wasn't dead, there were times Keisha hated her, of course, but through all of that she loved her more than she loved anyone, and so she would continue to look for the wife she loved and hated. Keisha tucked her legs up in a small berth in the back of her truck's cab. On the pillow next to her, unread because she couldn't find the concentration, was one of the books from the library she had collected under the passenger seat. Outside the cab, she swore that she had heard it every night at the gas station diner. The whisper scratch of fingernails, a sound so quiet it was easily mistaken for silence, but she was sure it was the boogeyman, the Thistleman, waiting for her to get curious or afraid enough to investigate. "This better be worth it, Alice," she whispered. Nothing ever could be. She saw the Thistleman again and again in the weeks following the murder. Behind the bathrooms at rest stops, in the snack aisle at gas stations, sitting alone at the biggest booths of the smallest roadside bars, places with one kind of beer on the menu and video poker in the bathrooms, clumsy and brutal movements, like he didn't understand how his body worked. Sharp, yellow teeth, yellow fingernails, not cigarette yellow, but the translucent yellow just beneath their surface. In Horse Cave, Kentucky, she saw him in the buffet line at Love's Travel Shop. He was leering at her and eating pizza with the snatches of his spindly fingers, and she, no longer hungry, put the jerky she had been about to buy back on the shelf. In Holland, Montana, she saw him perusing the bargain knife selection at the $50,000 silver bar and gift shop, the biggest gift shop in the state. Animatronic statues of angels flapping their wings, ceramic wolves in ceramic landscapes, signs with cutesy sayings like, "A closed mouth gathers no foot." He held up a knife and winked at her and then laughed at something the salesman said. Later he would eat the salesman alive. In Davis City, Iowa, the Thistleman crossed the street in front of her. The town was small, almost all of it visible from its main intersection. Her breath caught when she realized what was gazing back at her from the crosswalk, smiling into the hanging folds of his skin and winking, and the light was green and she tested the limits of her truck's acceleration. In each instance, no one reacted as though there were anything off about the Thistleman. It wasn't that he didn't see him, he just noticed many of them look at him. But their gazes slid off him. He wasn't invisible. People saw him and then decided they didn't want to. The night of the Iowa encounter, still shaken by what she had seen, she stopped to treat herself to a hot dinner rather than a protein bar while driving. "So what do you do, honey?" said a man at the counter next to her. She had gone through some version of this conversation almost daily for the year she had been on the job. "Please don't. Please no," she thought. "I just want to eat this food and get back on the road where miles turn into cents, turn into dollars, turn into a paycheck." She nodded to the trucks parked outside. It was a truck stop. There was no one in this restaurant who had any other job except cooking the food and the people serving it. "What else?" her nod said. He looked at the trucks and looked at her and grinned to show a new and exciting thought, a thought that would really change things for her. "Honey, you don't look like the trucker type." She wasn't big, she wasn't white, she wasn't male, and her hand shook as a rule, and her voice was soft when she spoke at all. But she drove a truck. She did it for a living. What does a truck driver look like? Your days are numbered, motherfucker, she wanted to say. There's a new world coming. Get out of the way or get on board. I don't care which. She took her food and moved to an empty table across the room. He made more of a meal innocently throwing up his hands than he did at the lukewarm meatloaf on his plate. I was just saying, honey, geez. She thought about the dinners she and Alice had back at home before Alice's disappearance, before Keisha's long search. Nights where they made pizza, dough from scratch, sauce from scratch, cheese from the store. Keisha had loved making dough for the crust, flour and water in her hands, and first separating them into a silky whole, the yeast and gluten giving it life and breath. Her hands in her shirt covered in flour because she had never gotten in the habit of wearing an apron. They would open a bottle of wine and eat the pizza they made and watch whatever was on TV and fall asleep in a wine and bread coma. Yo, that sounds dope. If you're up for a wine and bread coma, hit me up. Love is cooking together. It's creating together. That's what Keisha thought. She didn't know what Alice thought. It turns out she had never known what Alice was thinking at all. Flour on her hands, sauce in her hands, their hands in their hands, something forgettable on the television, leg upon leg. That was a life, she thought. She could go to the police. She could tell them what? She had witnessed a monster eat a man in a murder no media had reported on, and the same monster was now following her, although she couldn't prove it? No. For now she'd have to take on this herself, as scared as she was. Later then at night, dinner over, man ignored as he tried to engage her again on the way out, and a good 50 billable miles of road driven, she switched on her CB radio, held the mic up to her mouth for a long time on the open channel. We talk about freedom in the same way we talk about art, she said to whoever was listening, like it's a statement of quality rather than a description. Art doesn't mean good or bad. Art only means art. It can be terrible and still be art. Freedom can be good or bad, too. There can be terrible freedom. She stopped to think, but kept the send button held. She didn't want to respond. She had heard enough from other people that night. You freed me, and I didn't ask you to. I didn't want you to. I am more free now than I have ever been. I am spiraling across this country. Maybe you are, too. I want our lines to cross, even one more time. She put the mic back, switched the radio off. Hand upon hand, she thought. Leg upon heart, upon couch, upon a day where we made pizza together. That's love, Alice. That's what it's made of. And so what is this? We're on chapter 3 now, but my voice has grown slightly hoarse. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Turtle Portal for giving a little listen, giving a little listenerino. 20-minute streams better than no-minute streams. Please, I beg of you. Give me money on Ko-fi.com/NicoPaints. I will be back tomorrow night, probably read more or maybe less. Good night, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Turtle Portal. Why does stuff cost money?